This episode of Hitched Homicide deals with the subject of rape. Listener discretion is advised.
Anchorage, Alaska, the land of rugged terrain, icy mountains, and endless wilderness. But beneath its serene beauty, one man during the 70s and 80s turned this frozen frontier into a hunting ground for his darkest desires. He was a soft-spoken baker by day and a cold-blooded predator by night. But how did he hide in plain sight, and how did his twisted hunting game last for so long? This is a chilling tale of a killer in a frozen hellscape. This is Robert Hansen, the butcher, the baker, the nightmare maker, part 1. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Podorf. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends over there in Poland, witaj.
Well, it's cold in Poland, and it's cold in Alaska, and that's where we're going.
Witaj, you taj,
There
everybody
you go.
tajes.
Everybody taj. Wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitched to Homicide, then like, rate, and review the podcast so others who are just like you and love true crime can find us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. If you want true crime with us all the time, please join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Go to Facebook and type in H2H In-Laws and Outlaws. Answer a couple questions you're in. We've got all kinds of new people in there.
Yep.
Go join. I post photos and other good information. It's a lot of wonderful, supportive people, true crime folks, just like you.
Yes, it is.
You can find us on Instagram at Hitched to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And we also have a Buy Me a Coffee link. It's cold outside. We got like 6 more inches of snow last night after an ice storm. We had snow, ice, and now more snow.
Yes.
And Rob's been drinking lots of coffee.
I have, and here it is.
You can find that link in our show notes. You can also send us a text. The link to that is at the very top of the show notes, and it says, send Chris and Rob a text.
Or coffee.
Or coffee.
Sorry.
Now, like I said, it's still snowing here in Kentucky. We've had ice. We've had snow. We've been stuck in the house. We've had frigid temps.
Scotty can't take walks. He's been driving us nuts.
He barely goes outside.
Yeah.
He sticks his head out the dog door and then looks at us like, no way, man.
Yeah. And when he does go outside, well, just let me just say, don't eat the yellow snow.
It's not happening. He just sticks his head out and is like, forget that. Forget that.
Amazon has got its fair share of order of pea pads.
This is true. This is true. But all this snow made me think of this case. It's been sitting on the docket for quite a while, and there are plenty of requests for this story.
Okay.
But in order to do justice by these victims, I had to break this into 2 parts. And I know there are some of you who hate a 2-parter, but we just got to do it this time.
Yep.
Before we get started, let me thank some sources. Murderpedia, the Department of Psychology at Radford University, LelandHale.com, Find a Grave, Wikipedia, the Anchorage Daily News, the Estherville Daily News, the Anchorage Times, the Daily Sitka Sentinel, the Peninsula Clarion, FBI.gov, First Blood on A&E Channel, and the Big Book of Serial Killers.
Was that Sitka, Alaska?
Sitka.
Sitka. Yes, that is Sitka.
Alaska.
Alaska. There are several books out there, but the one that seems to be referenced the most is Butcher Baker, The True Account of an Alaskan Serial Killer by Walter Gilmore and Leland E. Hale. Sorry, Leland.
Nah, say that 10 times fast.
I will post a link to that book and all the other sources in the show notes.
All right. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Robert Christian Bose Hansen was born on February 15th, 1939 in Estherville, Iowa, to Christian Chris Hansen and Edna Market Peterson Hansen. Chris, his father, was an immigrant baker from Denmark who came to the United States in 1925 when he was just 18 years old. Chris and Edna got married on August 9th, 1937, and 2 years later, Robert was born, but everybody seems to call him Bob. And in all the literature, he's really called Bob, but in all the sources that were kind of like from the outside looking in, they called him Robert. I'm going to call him Bob.
Well, my dad's name was Robert. I was named after him, but he went by Bob.
Yeah, Bob's your uncle.
Bob's your uncle.
I don't know exactly what that means, but
Yeah.
the British say it.
Bob Podorf. That was my dad.
Bob's your uncle.
Yeah.
So everybody called him Bob. He did have one sister, Alice, and the family lived in California for a bit. But when Bob is 10, they move to Pocahontas, Iowa,
Really?
where Chris opens his own bakery. Now, Bob's childhood was not easy because his father was really strict, and Bob worked long hours in their bakery. And by the age of 10, he's working in the bakery and making 45 cents to $1 a day.
Wow.
It's slave labor.
Wow.
And Chris wanted Bob to be tough. He wanted him to be strong. But he's just not. He's just not. He was short, he was thin, and Bob had really bad acne. So bad that he never really socialized with friends.
Oh, that's sad.
When he's 12 and in junior high, he's made fun of by the girls who would tease him. He hated school, and the rejection he felt from his classmates made him feel inadequate, as if his dad didn't already make him feel that way. In later years, he would recall his face as, quote, one big pimple, end quote.
Wow.
He was a loner. And Bob was a lefty. He was left-handed. But back then, teachers forced their students to use their right hand.
I always thought that was strange.
Well, my mother, God rest her soul, was a lefty, and she told me when she was in school, when she was little, she would write with her left hand, and the teacher would walk up and smack her fingers, smack her knuckles for using her left hand.
I don't get the reasoning behind that.
I don't either.
Okay.
She ended up being a lefty anyway.
Yeah.
But in English, the word left comes from the Anglo-Saxon word lift, meaning weak. Right also means to be right.
Okay.
And left-handed people have been considered unlucky and even evil. The word sinister comes from the Latin word for left.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And in Britain, in the Middle Ages, lefties were associated with the devil and often accused of the crime of witchcraft.
So it's not just redheads.
It's not just redheads.
But if you were a redhead and
a lefty,
wow.
I feel sorry for you.
Yeah, you're done.
Bob was forced to use his right hand, and he says this resulting stress made his stuttering problem, which he had, even worse.
God, could he have any more things going on?
I know. He's small. His dad hates him for being kind of a weakling. He's got bad acne, and he stutters.
Wow.
But there are 4 factors most likely to contribute to the development of stuttering. Genetics, 60% who stutter have a family member who also does. Child development, children with other speech and language problems or developmental delays are more likely to stutter. Neurophysiologically, it is a problem because recent neurological research has shown that people who stutter process speech and language differently than
Really?
people who don't stutter. And what he is saying, family dynamics, high expectations, and fast-paced lifestyles can contribute to stuttering.
Okay.
So maybe Bob's stuttering didn't come from being a lefty as much as it did from his father expecting so much of him and him falling short.
Okay.
Quote, in the younger years, I would run away crying. I'd run off someplace and hide for a day or so. I just started to hate. I hated to be around people in general, but wanted so doggone bad. It was pathetic.
Wow.
When he's in high school, he's working hard at the bakery, and his parents were not only strict disciplinarians, they were strict religious parents as well. He was working every day, but he wasn't making any money or enough money to do much with his classmates. Quote, going way back to my high school days, I guess I was what you might call very frustrated, upset all the time. I would see my friends going out on dates and so forth, and I had a tremendous desire to do the same thing. My gosh, I looked like a freak and I sounded like one, end quote. And he does have sort of a high-pitched voice. So you can imagine his dad, who was a baker's son himself and sort of learned, the hard knocks in the bakery. He wanted to do the same thing to his own son.
Right.
But his own son was a little bit of a weakling with bad skin and a really high voice. So it's not a good combination.
Right.
According to his high school yearbook, where they misspelled his name.
Gee
What does that feel
whiz.
like, Rob?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I wasn't acne ridden, though.
No, but the name gets misspelled a lot.
Yeah, it still does to this day. I've actually thought about legally changing my name to Portoff.
Or Potroff.
Or
That's a
Potroff.
good one.
Yeah, but 99% of the time it's Portoff.
Yeah.
I just never understood that. Anyway.
But they misspelled his name in the yearbook. He did participate in boys' chorus, pep club, driver's ed, typing. I thought that was interesting. He was on the basketball team, but he didn't letter, which meant he was riding pine the whole time.
Yeah.
You're riding the pine pony, pal.
He does letter in track and long distance running as well as broad jump, but what he really liked more were solitary activities like fishing, archery, and hunting.
Yeah.
That's called foreshadowing. You knew it was coming.
I was ready.
So the girls are ignoring him, and that mixed with his father telling him he's inadequate, he's a very angry and aggressive kid. Quote, I didn't start to hate all women. I started to fall in love with them. I wanted them to like me so much, end quote. And Bob didn't just want a girl. He wanted the girls who were way out of his league, the prettiest girls in the class, the most accomplished, the kind who were dating the boys who were the most handsome and the most talented and the smartest.
She's out of your league, bro.
Right.
And these girls rejected him, and he developed these revenge fantasies. Quote, I would do anything and everything I could think of to get back at the school that I convinced myself was out to do Bob Hansen wrong. I was the rebuttal of all the girls around school and so forth and jokes. I started to fall in love with every one of them. Every one of them became so precious to me because I wanted their friendship. I wanted them to like me so much, end quote.
So I'm going to guess this isn't going to end like Napoleon Dynamite in his big dance scene.
It's not.
Do chickens have talons?
And everybody cheering for him.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not. But he said rebuttal. I do think that he meant he was the butt of the joke, not the rebuttal of a joke.
Right.
In 1957, Bob graduated from high school and shortly thereafter enlisted in the Army Reserves, hoping to leave behind his troubled youth and make something of himself. They shipped him off to basic training in Fort Dix, New Jersey. Bob is 18 years old, and while he's training in the Army Reserves, Bob loses his virginity to a sex worker in a hotel.
Do you like the left side or the right?
If we do it right, hun, we're going to use both sides.
In Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Oh, really? Welcome to Kentucky.
That's the only contribution we have to this.
Wow.
He liked it so much, he paid for more encounters with sex workers while he was away from Iowa. In 1959, after basic training, he was required to devote 1 weekend a month to the military. He's now 20 years old. He spent the rest of his time working in his father's bakery, and while he's in the reserves, he works as Army Reserve Military Police, and he became an assistant drill instructor in Pocahontas, Iowa, for the junior police. What's the junior police? Is this like high school boys who want to become police officers?
They're really little, tiny policemen. They stop Volkswagens. And...
You're terrible. 3 years after graduation in 1960, he fell in love and married a local girl. Her name is Phoebe.
Oh.
I couldn't find a last name. She probably liked it that way.
Yeah.
But finally, he's getting the attention he's so woefully craved from a woman. But it's not enough. He wants retribution on the town that made him feel like an outcast when he was growing up.
This isn't good.
Quote, With my complexion and such and everything else, I don't know if I felt I was cheated out of that in my younger years or I was just seeing everybody else got theirs. Then it's my turn to have fun now, end quote.
Wow.
So having a wife kind of like gave him some confidence, and he's looking back and thinking, I didn't like that.
Right.
And somebody needs to pay for the way I felt when I was in high school.
Yeah.
So he comes up with a plan to set fire to the bus barn. So the bus garage, they called it the bus barn in Pocahontas. And the day he picks to do this is December 7th, 1960. He's 20 years old. He's a grown-ass man with a wife. And now that he's feeling his oats a little bit, he's ready to do all of this.
That can't be good.
It's not.
Yeah.
And again, the day he picks to do this is December 7th, 1960. It's the day that the public school and the Catholic school have a big basketball game against each other.
Okay.
And everybody in town is going to be there. You know, what's always the thing that's up on the marquee when the little town leaves for the big championship game? Last person out, turn out the lights,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And everyone in town's going to be there. What I haven't told you is that Bob is also a volunteer fireman.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So in order to carry this plan out, he enlists or he forces, depending on who you believe, a 16-year-old who was working in his dad's bakery with him. And these two set fire to the bus barn. And afterwards, this 16-year-old feels so guilty about what he was witness to, he goes to the police. And this is when Bob's life starts to fall apart.
Okay.
He's sentenced to 3 years in jail. His wife, Phoebe, of 6 months, is like, see ya. She divorces him.
I'm tapping out.
And his father was so ashamed of him and what he had done to the family that he sold the bakery in Iowa and bought a resort in Walker, Minnesota.
I can't even look at you.
Wow.
This is the first major event that occurred that would fit Bob into this psychological profile of a developing serial killer.
Wow.
So Bob is sentenced to 3 years in prison, and Phoebe, she's gone. He only served 20 months of this sentence.
Really?
And he was paroled despite being assessed while in prison as having, quote, infantile personality disorder, end quote.
Wow.
Which made him obsess about getting even with people. When he's released, he immediately goes to Minnesota to be with his parents. Where else is he going to go?
Right.
It's now 1963, and Bob is 24 years old. But in 1963, he also meets the next woman that he is going to marry. Her name is Darla Henriksen. Darla Marie Henriksen knew what she was getting into with Bob. Unlike Phoebe, she knew he had set the bus barn on fire.
And she still married him.
And she still likes him. Yeah, they're not married yet, but
okay.
they're in love, right?
Okay. All right.
Also in 1963, Bob goes to Chicago for 3 weeks to complete a course at Wilton's Cake Decorating School.
Okay.
Anybody who decorates cake, anybody who does anything, I do. I love to bake. Wilton's has all kinds of fun things that you can do with cakes. And that's where he is in Chicago taking a class.
And my wife is a wonderful baker because I used to weigh 89 pounds.
And then he married me. So not long after he goes to this Wilton's Cake Decorating School, he gets an opportunity at a bakery in Minot, North Dakota, 300 plus miles away from his mom and dad. And he had to get permission from his parole officer, but he took the job, and Darla followed him there. And Bob didn't work there long. According to him, quote, it didn't pan out too well, end quote.
Really?
And these two moved to Iowa City, where Darla enrolled at the University of Iowa. And they get married and take a week-long honeymoon.
Okay.
When they return, Bob gets a job as a fill-in manager for Cox Bakery, a chain that had 32 bakeries throughout the Midwest.
All right.
And fill-in meant he would fill in when existing managers went on vacation. So he was in a few different cities. His first assignment was in Minot, North Dakota, and it's really Bob's first chance at acting out once again. Darla's not with him. She's in school, But by his second assignment, she was with him. She stops school in Iowa and enrolls at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's now 1964. Quote, I really didn't like working for Cox too well, so we went back and decided it was time for Darla to come back and complete her college, end quote.
Okay.
Now, while Darla went to school, Bob takes a job at Myers Bakery in Minneapolis for about a year and a half. He's either working at a bakery, hunting, or with his new love, Darla. His next assignment was in Rapid City, South Dakota. Darla went with him and worked as a bookkeeper and receptionist, setting aside her education for the moment. But their stint in South Dakota didn't last very long, and they were back in Minnesota again.
Okay.
In fact, Darla Henriksen had little influence over Bob or his decision-making or his behavior, other than maybe making him go to church every now and then. And early in their marriage, while living in Minneapolis, Bob got into trouble once again. One lie that Bob Hansen repeatedly told himself was that his wife, Darla, kept him out of trouble.
All right.
And now we know that Bob had this complex relationship with reality. Or more to the point, he had a difficult time controlling his impulses and therefore staying out of trouble.
Okay.
Quote, I got arrested for stealing a god-darn softball.
Yeah.
You know, a thing that didn't cost nothing, but yet it was the idea. It wasn't that I'd been in that store stealing stuff many times. I belonged to a softball team back there in a mobile home park that we lived in. They had a ball team there. It was all volunteer. So the guys were bringing stuff all the time. If I got stuff, that made me a good guy, end quote.
Wow. So he basically, his whole life revolved around, he just wanted approval.
I think he wants approval, but he's mad.
Yeah.
He's mad for the way he's treated.
Right.
And if he wants something, he's going to take it, kind of thing.
Right.
So he's stealing just for the thrill of doing it. And even though he was caught several times, no charges are ever brought. And he was taking stupid stuff. Quote, it made me feel good to get by with it. The more I could get by with, the better. You know, end quote.
Wow.
In 1967, after Darla graduated from the University of Minnesota in March with a BS in education, the Hansens decided it was time for a new start.
Okay.
Quote, I used to like to hunt and fish, and I always read all of those stories about Alaska. I approached her. I said, Darla, I sure would like to go up to Alaska for a while, end quote.
To Sitka.
No, they don't go to Sitka. But Darla says, yes, let's go to Alaska.
Why not?
She's followed him all these different places. She's quit school, started school, quit school, started school. And she's the one with the college education. She's the one with the good head on her shoulders.
Sure.
The next weekend, they drove to Iowa to see Darla's parents and tell them they were heading to Alaska. Bob and Darla tell her mom and dad that they're going to be there for 6 months, maybe a year. And they left for Alaska.
Okay.
Anchorage, Alaska.
All right.
Now, in the mountains around Anchorage, Bob honed his skills as a hunter. He was really good when he was younger and living in Iowa. And now that he's in Alaska, he's just upped his game. And he liked it because it was solitary and he was really good at it. He was really good at it.
Okay.
And in 1969, 1970, and 1971, he had 4 animals entered into the Pope and Young record book.
Really?
And if you don't know what that is, because I didn't,
No idea.
the Pope and Young record book recognizes a bow hunting achievement and celebrates all the times and efforts involved that culminated in that moment.
We're back to Napoleon Dynamite.
Pope and Young is recognized as the official repository for records on bow harvested North American big game animals.
Wow.
He's not out hunting deer.
No.
It's elk and these huge sheep and bear and yeah.
Wow.
Then Bob discovered that he liked another type of stalking and hunting even more because he has said part of The thrill of hunting for him was stalking these animals. And now he's kind of discovered that he can stalk and hunt other things too.
This doesn't sound like it's going in the right direction.
It's not.
Yeah.
In 1971, tons of people are flocking to Alaska. Many were looking for jobs working on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. Others were looking to escape for a place where nobody knew them. You know, where do you go when you just want to start over and nobody knows you?
Cheers.
Nobody knows your name? Well, in 1970s, it was Alaska.
Wow.
In the early 70s in Anchorage, there was an extremely rough Tenderloin district. The pipelines being built, and it brought with them men with a criminal past and sex workers who wanted to take care of those men with a criminal past.
Sounds like the Old West.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yep.
During the 70s, Anchorage went from 60,000 people to 200,000 people.
Whoa. Jeez.
Yeah.
Man.
Lots of bars and strip joints opened. There was good money to be made in the middle of this wilderness. And these bars and strip clubs were largely run by Seattle crime boss Frank Cola Curio. Cola Curcio. I don't know.
Him and some schifooza got blown back on their keisters.
This Italian guy.
He was a mob guy.
He's a mob guy. And Frank was the boss of this Cola Curio organization. I am sorry to all the Italian folks out there. I didn't look that one up, and I'm just butchering that backward and forward.
You're forgiven.
But he's really big into strip clubs in Seattle. And in fact, Frank's crime organization will be the subject of something called Strippergate.
Really?
In 2003,
Wow.
where former Washington governor and Frank were bribing members of the Seattle City Council.
Jeez.
So that's who this guy is that owns most of these strip clubs.
Okay.
But this Tenderloin area in Anchorage, it was a wide open district centered on 4th Avenue where anything goes.
Okay.
Young women were lured there by promises of making big money, dancing in clubs with names like Wild Cherry, the Arctic Fox, the Booby Trap,
Nice booby trap.
Yeah.
and the Great Alaskan Bush Company.
Oh, man.
The population is growing, disposable income is at hand, and Anchorage is just skyrocketing in money and people
And
during
buddy, business is a booming.
this. Business was a booming. But the clubs also had violence happening inside them. There were beatings, armed robberies, and murders. I read that between 1979 and 1983, police responded 207 times to disturbances at the Booby Trap alone.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Bob and Darla settle into their life in Alaska and have 2 children, and he's working in a warehouse, and Darla gets a job teaching at a Christian school. Now, Darla makes time for Bob. She loves Bob. She's making good money for Bob, but she's really not the type of woman who excited him. Remember, he wants the cream of the crop,
Sure.
the ungettable woman.
Yeah.
And he's ready to hunt for them because there are lots of them out there parading around on 4th Avenue and in these clubs,
Right.
like the Booby Trap. He loves the thrill and the rush of stalking animals for the kill, and now it's women he's going to stalk for the kill. November 22nd, 1971, 6:20 p.m., 18-year-old real estate secretary Susan Heppard is returning to her apartment at 3608 Lois Drive in Anchorage from work. She parks her car and starts to plug in the head bolt heater. A head bolt heater is a type of engine block heater that uses an electric heating element to warm a car's engine. I had to look that up.
Yeah.
It was invented by a man named Andrew Freeman to help start his car in the cold winters of North Dakota in the 1940s.
Yeah.
Which just made me think of Fargo and her saying,
Prowler needs a jump.
"The Prowler needs a jump."
Love that movie.
And this is what Susan's doing before she's going into her apartment. She's like putting this heater onto her engine. And as she's doing this, Bob grabs her from behind, sticks a gun in her back, and says, quote, "Don't scream."
Wow.
But Susan screams anyway. And then Bob put the gun to her head and placed his free hand over her mouth and said it again. "Don't scream. There's a gun at your head and I'm going to blow your brains out if you scream," end quote.
Wow.
But the first scream caught the attention of Susan's roommate, who hears it. She looks out the window and immediately calls the police. Within minutes, the sound of sirens were in the air, and Bob, who was as scared as a lactose-intolerant kid in a cheese factory, turned and ran away. He's such a coward.
Yeah.
The Anchorage police arrive right after this, and they see Bob walking nearby with no coat, no hat, and the temperature was around 10 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right.
And when Bob tried to duck into the woods, the police could see his footprints through the snow, and they catch up with him. And when they do, they find an orange baseball hat and a loaded .38 caliber revolver hidden in the wheel well of an abandoned car. Now, I realize he's a hunter, and he's been hunting game. But you don't want to wear a bright orange baseball hat to an abduction.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're really good at what you're doing, if you think about it, I mean, because the hat so he doesn't get, shot by another hunter.
I might have to use this in the Bless Your Hearts.
Well, they catch up with him and they parade Bob Hansen out of the woods and they ask Susan, "Is this the guy who attacked you?" And she says, "Yes."
Yep.
And he was wearing that orange hat. And when they take Bob into custody, he denies any contact with Susan. Deny. Yeah. He said that he was driving toward Anchorage International Airport to go bow hunting and that he became very tense and decided to pull over and get out of his car and walk around to relieve the tension.
What was he tense about?
He didn't say. I mean, he's going bow hunting. Maybe he's tense about going bow hunting.
Yeah, okay.
But all they have to do is pressure him a little bit, and Bob cracks and says, "Okay, maybe I was involved. And if I was, I need help. I need psychiatric help."
I need help! I'm sick!
And it's at this point, on December 15th, during this indictment for trying to abduct her, the court ordered Bob to undergo a psychiatric evaluation at his own expense. But Bob's attorney acknowledged that Bob wasn't right. "Your Honor, my client ain't right." And he tells the court that Bob will be seeing a psychiatrist later that day. So this is December 15th. And after they say he's going to see a psychiatrist before, we go to trial or anything, Bob is released on his own recognizance.
What?
They just let him go.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the women were too big of a temptation for Bob. Quote, "I'd drive from work. I'd drive uptown in a hurry and sit there and just look at the prostitutes on the street. It would give me this sexual big blow-up charge." I don't know exactly what he meant by that.
We'll just gloss over that.
I know what he meant.
I got this thrill when they would open the door. It was something. A key turned over from right to wrong to right again, where it was all right on these here prostitutes. I could do things to them that I couldn't do with a good woman, end quote.
Hey, all women are good.
Yes, they are. Girl power.
There you go.
December 19th, 1971, just 4 days after he's in court for assaulting Susan, sex worker Patricia Ann Roberts is in the Nevada Cafe in Anchorage, Alaska, having a cup of tea. It's sometime between 3 and 4 in the morning. Now, remember, he's always out in the middle of the night.
Right.
She went out to start her car and let it warm up. And as she walked out of the cafe, she sees a car drive up and park. She continues on to her car and it starts, she starts it up. Then she goes back into the cafe where Bob Hansen is waiting for her at the door. As she crosses the threshold into the cafe, Bob pulls a gun out from underneath his coat. He pointed it at her, saying something like, "Don't give me any trouble. This is a .22 caliber gun. He tells Patricia to, quote, get in my car, end quote. And she did.
Wow.
After binding her hands with leather shoelaces, he drove her south on the Seaward Highway. Along the way, he kept pulling off the road, telling her he wanted to make love to her. He tried to kiss her, made her strip down so she couldn't escape. So he makes her take off all her clothes so she can't, like, jump out of the car.
Wow.
He said he wanted to slash her bra with his knife. Remember that.
Okay.
She kept telling him she didn't want to do it in the car. And Bob finally got to a motel deep into the Kenai Peninsula at Cooper Landing, 98 miles south of Anchorage. He drives for 98 miles.
Good grief.
He tied her up and raped her. And then on the way back to Anchorage, he threatened to kill her and her family if she ratted him out. Once he drove her deep into the wilderness and she had to talk him out of it. She had to talk him down and to get back on the interstate.
Wow.
And Bob did bring her back to Anchorage.
So she was smart.
She was really smart. I mean, she was a sex worker. So, he's got this gun in her side and she's, I want to make love to you. She's just going to go along with whatever it is that he wants to do so she can stay alive. She's a survivalist, right?
Right.
Then on December 22nd, 1971, just 2 days after he picks up Patty and rapes her, then drops her off, 18-year-old Celia Beth Van Zanten, she goes by Beth, goes missing. Celia Beth Van Zanten was born on July 30th, 1953 in Anchorage, Alaska. Her parents were John Jacob Jack Van Zanten.
Wow.
John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt.
Sorry, you beat me to it.
We share a brain.
Yeah.
Her mom's name was Enid Kathleen Kelper Van Zanten. Enid. Love that.
Enid.
On December 22nd, 1971, Beth is watching a movie with two of her three older brothers in this house that they live in. They share in this one house on Nick Avenue in South Anchorage. She's waiting to begin a babysitting assignment. She'd agreed to do this on this night there in the house that she shares with her two brothers and a cousin.
All right.
So she agrees to keep this child. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a second. But before her babysitting gig starts, she decides to run to a local buy low convenience store and pick up some soda before the kids dropped off. So she's got about 30 minutes. And the buy low closed at 9 p.m. and she left at 8:30. And between 8:45 and 9 p.m., a witness spotted Beth go into the buy low. At around 9 p.m., a neighbor claimed to have spotted her on Northern Lights Boulevard. Beth never returned home. She also never apparently made it to the store just 3 blocks away. Now, one person saw her go into the store. Another person said she was never in the store. But for some reason, Beth wasn't reported missing for 2 full days after her disappearance that night.
Really?
Now, one source gave some insight into this. Police canvassed Beth's neighborhood and they interviewed her family members, and their statements kind of flew in the face of the statements given by Beth's brothers. According to the neighbors, Beth's brothers were stoners who never knew where Beth was at any given time.
Yeah. They didn't know where they were.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Authorities interviewed her foster cousin who lived with the family. His name is Greg. He was out clubbing and drinking the night Beth disappeared, and he was the one who had arranged for her to babysit for one of his friends. So it's her 2 brothers, her, and this foster cousin.
Okay.
And the foster cousin is the reason she's babysitting.
Gotcha.
Neighborhood witnesses reported seeing Beth as late as 11 p.m. the night she disappeared. They said she was hitchhiking.
Well, and 2, I mean, during this era, hitchhiking was not uncommon.
It's not uncommon, but when she leaves, I mean, she basically says, according to her stoner brothers, that, she's got a half hour before she has to be back to babysit.
Right.
3 days later, on Christmas Day, 2 brothers are at the McHugh Creek and Chugach State Park south of Anchorage to take photos when they find the body of a young woman, nude from the waist down. When the police arrive on the scene, she looks like someone who'd been reported missing just days before. She was young, fair with long blonde hair. Her wrists were tied behind her back with speaker wire, and she had a gag in her mouth, or had had a gag in her mouth at one point. It was below her mouth now.
Okay.
She'd been sexually assaulted, and her blue jeans were not in the area around her, nor was her green parka coat or her hiking boots.
Got it.
And it seemed as though she'd escaped from her killer, because she's naked from the waist down. And it seemed like she escaped from her killer, and while she was running for her life in the darkness, she had fallen into a deep ravine. She actually died from exposure.
Oh, wow.
Now, according to forensic evidence, she had attempted to climb back up this slope, but was unable to do it because her hands are tied behind her back.
Yeah.
And there's 3 feet of snow on the ground, by the way. 3 feet. And she froze to death.
Wow. I have trouble walking out to the mailbox when we have 6 inches.
It's true. Now, Bob Hansen has always denied that he had anything to do with Beth, but she was found in the state that his other victims were as well, hands bound. And her home on Knick Avenue in South Anchorage is 1 mile from where Bob assaulted Susan, the secretary, trying to force her into his car when he's wearing the orange hat out in front of the apartment complex. That's 1 mile away.
Coincidence?
I think not.
I think not.
There you go.
In the parking lot, police could see where a car had been circling the roadway because there's all this snow, and they're thinking maybe the killer is actually looking for his victim after she's escaped. And when she is autopsied by the medical examiner, they confirm that she had been sexually assaulted, and her bra had been cut off of her body, leaving a diagonal slash between her breasts. And what did he say to the girl that he picked up at the diner, the cafe?
Yeah, you wanted to
I want to cut your bra off of you, right?
Yep.
On December 26th, Patty, who gets away, she's the sex worker who's picked up at the cafe, on the 19th of December, now it's the 26th, Patty and her dad show up at the Alaska State Troopers headquarters to register a complaint. And Patty is shown a lineup of photos who all look like somebody she described. Smaller men, horn-rimmed glasses. And she picks out Bob, who had a brand new mugshot from the 19th of December and his assault on Susan Heppard without hesitation.
Wow.
She tells the police that Bob had told her that he had killed before.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So when he threatens her and says, I'll kill you if you tell anybody, I'll kill you, I'll kill your family,
right?
Because I've killed before.
Man.
Quote, the things that with Patricia in the motel room there excited me like I've never been excited before in my life. I got to thinking right at that time, boy, I couldn't wait until I could do it again. End quote.
Jeez.
Bob is arrested for this rape on December 28th, and they booked him into the state jail on December 29th. And that same day, he found himself before the judge again. This time, his wife Darla and Reverend Abrahamson from Darla's church begged the court for leniency.
Wow.
And several of Bob's buddies also testified on his behalf. A guy named Gerald G. and John Summerall, who was a hunting buddy and an insurance executive.
Okay.
And on January 26, 1972, Bob was indicted on 3 felony charges, and a trial was set for the week of March 20th, 1972. Now, this gets kind of complicated and messy, but I'm going to do my best to explain how this goes down.
All right.
Bob's attorney, Jim Gilmore, he's a busy guy because Bob was facing the charges in Patty's rape and the assault with a deadly weapon charge, along with the charges of assault and attempting kidnapping for Susan Heppard. And Bob did see Alaska's psychiatric specialist, Dr. J. Ray Langdon, who started the Langdon Clinic in 1960. Bob wouldn't see the courtroom again until March of 1972, when Judge Fitzgerald evaluated Dr. Langdon's February 28, 1972 examination. And the DA didn't come prepared that day, and Bob's attorney ate him alive.
Wow.
Jim Gilmore, Bob's attorney, put the state on notice of a possible psychiatric defense and had Bob enter a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity in the Patty Roberts rape case. Now, that's the sex worker.
Right.
He claimed to have only had vague memories of that night, and at one point claiming, quote, I can't remember going down there, meaning to the Nevada Club.
Mm-hmm.
Just doesn't seem like I would go there right before Christmas, end quote. Then he abruptly calls off this interview saying he wanted to talk to his attorney and his doctor. He was already moving toward this psychiatric defense in this case involving this real estate secretary as well, because he's going to use the same explanation. I'm crazy. Reason by insanity.
Right.
I did all this because I'm crazy.
Right.
For kidnapping Patty and also trying to abduct the secretary.
Gotcha.
Now, by the time his sentencing in March of 1972 rolls around, Bob had convinced the judge that he's not dangerous. He was married. He had a child. His church friends testified. They all had such high regard for him. His employer told the court he was, quote, a capable and willing worker, end quote. And the psychiatrist persuaded the court that these offenses were related to Hansen's manic depression. He did these things because he's a manic depressive. And even though he'd told the doctor that during his psychiatric evaluation that he, quote, fantasized about doing all sorts of harmful things to the girls who rejected him. Can you believe this?
Yeah.
As the judge put it at Hansen's sentencing, quote, I believe that this offense was committed, as the doctor tells us, during a period of disassociation, which he states is a condition which arises from your mental condition, end quote.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bob came off as this perfect, upstanding citizen. The rape case was dismissed, mostly because Patty was a sex worker, and she wasn't a good witness.
Man.
And in exchange for a no contest plea in the assault case against Susan, Bob was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison on the condition that he continued to receive psychotherapy because the judge said, quote, your condition is one that may be treatable, end quote. And the judge granted Bob a suspended imposition of service, and by June of 1972, Bob was no longer in jail, but in a halfway house. So less than 6 months.
Man.
And he's in a halfway house. July 7th, 1973, Megan Siobhan Emmerich, age 17, disappears from Seward, Alaska. Megan was last seen wearing blue jeans, a long-sleeve checkered shirt, a brown short-sleeve sweatshirt, and suede ski boots. Megan was a student at the boarding school of Seward Skill Center and was last seen walking out of a dormitory laundry room. Okay. Now, all of her personal belongings were left behind, including her ID. Her roommate searched for Megan for 3 days before she goes to the police. Years later, when Bob is confronted with evidence that he had something to do with Megan's death, he denied it, but he did admit to a former inmate that he took Megan to a cabin in the Seward region that was only reachable by boat. It was there that he killed her and buried her.
Wow.
He will admit to the police that he had met Megan while he was walking up and down the docks, but that he had nothing to do with it. But yet he told an inmate, I raped her, I killed her, and I buried her.
Wow.
Then in the summer of 1975, Bob asks his parole officer for permission to go to Seward for the 4th of July holiday. He wants to go fishing. And after his parole officer agreed, he called a friend and asked if the guy knew of any girls they could party with in Seward. And on July 5th, 1975, Mary Kathleen Lannon, Phil, was reported missing. Mary was born in 1953 and was last seen in Seward, Alaska on July 5th, 1975, exactly where he had asked his parole officer for permission to go. She lived on Lower Point Road, and her husband was away working on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. A friend gave her a ride into town and dropped her off at the bakery, and another friend saw her at the waterfall on Lowell Point Road between 1:30 and 2 p.m. She's never been heard from again.
Really?
It was uncharacteristic of Mary to leave without telling anybody. Her husband's working. He's away. He's working on the Alaska's North Slope at the time.
Right.
And later, Bob will say he was in Seward that day, but he didn't have anything to do with Mary's disappearance. Her body has never been found. 2 years later, in 1976, now Bob is 37 years old, and he's still shoplifting from stores. Hasn't learned his lesson.
Yeah.
November 3rd, 1976, while Hansen is shopping at an Anchorage department store, a store security guard watches him, quote, acting suspiciously in the store's sporting goods section. He watched Bob place an old sales receipt on a chainsaw box and leave the store with it. And the guard apprehended him in the store parking lot. Quote, I looked at them and I remembered that this is the longest explanation. This is what he says to the police. This is what Bob says to the police.
Bring it on.
And don't forget, he kind of stutters through all of this too.
Okay.
Quote, I looked at them and remembered about 5 weeks previous, my father and I had been cutting wood for our fireplaces, and his remarking 3 or 4 times how much he would like to have one. My folks live in Oregon and were visiting us for 4 weeks to use when he and my mother go camping along the coast. I told my father that he would be more than welcome to take mine, meaning his chainsaw, but he refused. I thought of this and all the presents my parents had given me through the years and how wonderful it would be if I could give him a saw for Christmas. I also thought, of course, about that my wife and I had just bought this summer a new home and put everything we had saved for more than 9 years into. I guess many, many thoughts went through my mind as I looked at the saws. I wanted almost more than anything to please my father and could just imagine the expression on his face on Christmas Day if I could give him that saw. I walked around the store some more and out the front door. Outside, a native man had just had a heart attack. The police, fire department, and paramedics were there to give him treatment. My father is 69 and has had 1 heart attack and is very overweight. Again, I thought of the chainsaw and how pleased he would be to receive it at Christmas. I walked back into the store, again to the saws. I thought there was a young man watching me, but then he seemed to disappear. On the one box that I picked up, there was a sales receipt. I guess this is when I first really seriously thought about taking the saw. It seemed like nobody would know if I paid for the saw or not if they saw a sales receipt on the box. I took the saw and walked out the door when I was apprehended and arrested. I know what I did was wrong, and I'm very sorry for doing so. End quote.
Wow. That's a lot of information.
Yeah. So he's just like, I saw this saw. I wanted it. I can't afford it because we'd saved all this money for our house for 9 years. And, then I walked outside and this guy's having a heart attack and it made me think of my dad again. So I went back in and I took the saw. But I'm really sorry for it.
Okay. Whatever you say.
Now, of course, it's not the first time he's stolen anything, just the first time he's going to be prosecuted for it.
Right.
In fact, when he's evaluated by psychiatrists, he tells them that he had a shoplifting problem. This psychiatrist, Dr. Parker, wrote a second evaluation letter in which he characterizes Bob's stealing as, quote, probably obsessive, end quote, because Bob has, quote, an inability to resist it and a feeling of being forced, end quote. Yeah.
Okay.
He feels like he's forced to shoplift.
It's kind of like when I feel like I'm being forced to eat ice cream.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can't control myself.
Somebody's making me eat this brownie. It's true.
Yeah.
That's going to be my excuse from now on.
There you go.
Dr. McMahon testified at Bob's sentencing hearing saying he didn't have classic manic depressive disorder because there were no serious depressive episodes. Bob's impulses were poorly controlled during the mood energy upswings. And Dr. McMahon, he's got a really hard name, he further testified that Bob's prior offenses were also likely manifestations of his disorder. And they gave him the drug lithium to stabilize his moods.
That's heavy duty.
Bob got a 5-year sentence. He's a third-time offender in their eyes. And, of course, they don't know he's also a serial killer.
Right, right.
He appeals this sentence, But he was sent to the Juneau Correctional Center, and he filed a motion to reduce this sentence. And they do. He only serves 1 year. And when he's out, he's back to hunting again. Doll sheep, wolves, and bears. And he's got all these trophies hanging on the basement walls of the house he told the police about that he and his wife had saved for years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, mind you, Darla is sticking with Bob through all of this. His wife is sticking with him.
Good grief.
She would bring the kids to the prison because by this time they've had a second child. She'd bring the kids to the prison to see their dad. She's trying to be a good mom and a good wife. She's hanging in there with him.
For better or for worse?
Yeah.
Except all Bob's given is worse.
Oh, and he's just getting started.
Wow.
When he's out, he decides he wants to have his own business. What do you think it might be?
A bakery?
A bakery. But Bob doesn't have the money to open his own bakery. So he commits insurance fraud. All of his trophies, his awards, those award-winning trophies, those are all insured. So he takes them from his house, says that they were stolen, and receives a check for $13,000. It's 1980. $13,000, which today is $50K.
I was going to say it's a lot of money.
He opens his own bakery at 9th and Ingra. A major highway ran just in front of it, and it was just a stone's throw from the 4th Avenue strip in downtown Anchorage, where the sex workers hang out, where the strip joints are.
How convenient.
How convenient.
How convenient. And because he works these wonky hours as a baker, basically through the night, he was always around when the sex workers were always around as well. And later he will tell his insurance company when the trophies find their way back onto his walls that someone had stolen them and mysteriously brought them back.
Oh, geez.
But now he owns his own business, but his passion is still hunting, and the bakery was doing really well. And by the time Bob Hansen is thriving in his bakery and cruising the Tenderloin area each night looking for a disposable woman, police are realizing that lots of women seem to be going missing. They're reported by their friends or family. They're just gone.
Wow.
Then in the fall or winter of 1979, Bob Hansen abducted, raped, and killed a girl between the ages of 16 and 24. She was small in stature, about 4'11 to 5'1". She had long, light brown hair with a strawberry hint. She was white and wearing a brown leather jacket, a light-colored knit sweater, jeans, and a red knee-high heeled boots. She wore a wide copper bracelet with 3 turquoise stones and a beaded necklace with a turquoise shell and a single heart charm. She wore gold hoop earrings and had a gold ring with a white stone, a Timex wristwatch with a gold chain band, a gold case, brown face, and white hands on the watch. Salem brand matches were found in the pocket of her jacket. She's not going to be discovered until July of 1980. She's discovered in a heavily wooded area. It's not known whether she was a sex worker or not. Bob picked her up downtown and told her he was going to take her to his home. But when the girl realized that he wasn't driving in the direction of Anchorage, she asked him to drive her back before he unsuccessfully attempted to convince her that he was driving to a safer location, telling her that it was just a little farther. She told him, "I'm not going with you." Then Bob attempted to placate her before pulling a gun on her and saying, quote, "You do exactly as I say, and you won't get hurt."
Wow.
Bob drove her in the direction of the Eklutna Lake, where his truck got stuck on a desolate road when he veered in the direction of a muddy swamp. He persuaded her to help him get his pickup out of the mud, but when he got the truck out of the muddy rut, she takes off running. So she's pushing, he's driving. She starts running away. He starts to chase her. He grabbed her by the hair, tripped her to the ground. She struggled with Bob and she screamed, quote, "Don't kill me, don't kill me," end quote.
Man.
At first, Bob restrained her, telling her that he didn't intend to hurt her. But she yells back at him, quote, "You are. You're going to kill me," end quote. Then he stabbed her once in the back with a black-handled buck knife as she lay face down. Her skeletal remains were found by workmen where she was buried in a shallow grave along a series of power lines north of Anchorage. And this is horrible, but authorities have said that the bears got to her, among other animals.
Wow.
Police referred to her as Eklutna Annie. No one has ever come forward to say that they knew her or her jewelry. I will post pictures of all of this in the In-Laws and Outlaws. There was a composite made of her face back then in 1980, but in 2020, they did a new one. Bob didn't remember her name, and to this day, she remains Eklutna Annie because she was found 1 mile south of South Eklutna Lake Road.
Wow.
The next month, May 19th, 1980, Joanne Messina is last seen in Seward, Alaska. She went out to dinner with Bob while working as a sex worker. She will be dubbed, quote, the Bear Lady, end quote, by Alaskan state troopers. A man named John Lucking was out in the woods when he came upon a bear. He killed the bear, but in doing so, he also uncovered what was left of Joanne.
Ooh.
Joanne was a 24-year-old topless dancer working in Seward, Alaska. She offered him sex in exchange for cash. Everything was going smoothly until Bob refused to pay for the sex act. And he wouldn't let her go either. He drove her and her dog to a distant place by the Snow River. She's got her dog with her.
Wow.
Then he hit her with a .22 caliber revolver before shooting her twice, but he still had her dog. So cover your ears, Scotty. Cover your ears. He shot the dog as well because he didn't want the dog leading anyone back to her grave.
Jeez.
This gravel pit where he dumped her body before covering up with more gravel.
Okay, now he's officially an animal.
Yeah. The dog and Joanne's belongings were tossed into the woods, and the gun was thrown into the Snow River. Her body is discovered on July 8th, 1980. Her remains were severely decomposed and had been eviscerated by the wildlife. June 28th, 1980, 24-year-old Roxanne Eastland is seen by her friends for the last time. She's reported missing on July 2nd, 1980, under the alias of Karen Lee Bonsgard. Roxanne's friends told police they'd not seen or heard from her since the afternoon of June 28th, when she was supposed to meet an unknown male on 4th Avenue in downtown Anchorage. She had been living at the Budget Motel on Spinard Road in Anchorage with her boyfriend for the last 2 weeks. She was between 25 and 23 years old. She's petite, 5'2", and between 90 and 105 pounds. She is just like so many of the others. He definitely has a type.
Yeah.
She has brown shoulder-length hair and brown eyes. She was last seen wearing a short brown leather coat with a fur collar, pants, and black high-heel boots. September 6, 1980, 41-year-old Lisa Futrell was working at a nightclub in Anchorage. She meets Bob and is kidnapped by him. When she didn't come home after her September 7th shift, her 2 housemates reported her missing. Her body will be discovered on May 9th, 1984, buried next to a gravel pit south of the former Nick Arm Bridge.
Wow.
November 17th, 1981, 23-year-old Sherry Morrow is a topless dancer at the Wild Cherry in Anchorage. According to the other dancers who worked there, she wasn't built for this kind of work. She was really sweet. And one night in the fall of 1981, a customer comes into the bar and said he was a modeling agent and he wanted to take photos of the girls, the dancers, and that he would pay them $500 to do it. Her friend Brenda tells her that there's something not right about this guy, and Sherry tells her that, quote, she has to go, end quote. She needed the money.
Yeah.
She went, and no one ever hears or sees Sherry Morrow again.
Man.
November 23rd, 1981, after Sherry goes missing, her boyfriend goes to the police because he's desperate to find her, and the police can't track down the man who offered Sherry money for the photo shoot. There are no other good leads, and the case goes cold.
All right.
On September 12th, 1982, almost 1 year later, a shallow grave is discovered by hunters on the banks of the Knik River which borders Anchorage. It's Sherry. She had 3 gunshot wounds to the back, and the cartridges were discovered close to the body. It's a .223 Ruger Mini 14 hunting rifle that had been used to murder her. Her body was fully clothed, but there were no bullet holes in her clothes, which meant she had been shot naked and then was redressed before she's buried.
Wow.
Then in January of 1982, Bob buys a Piper Super Cub, tail number N3089Z.
Wow.
It's a plane. It's a small plane.
Bob's making some money.
He took flying lessons but never got his pilot's license. He also bought a cabin in the Matanuska-Susitna Valley.
Okay.
Why? Well, he needs a more remote area in order to satisfy 2 of his favorite activities: sexually assaulting women and hunting. He's going to combine the 2.
Man.
His plans are now to get his victims into a more rural area where it doesn't matter how much or how loud they scream, and hunt them down. Next week, I'll continue the story of Robert Hansen, but for now, that's all I have to say about that.
You know, the thing that I took away from this, it's got to be difficult for a judge because in the after, you know, being a Monday morning quarterback,
Yeah.
you can say, how could they let him go? But I'm sure that if you don't have any evidence that there's really something bad going on,
Yeah.
that you would think, okay, well, this guy is redeemable. He can do this, you know.
Well, here's the thing. While he's doing all of this stuff, when he has the bakery, police officers used to go to his bakery for donuts.
Yeah.
He was nice to everybody.
Right.
He's very soft-spoken. He's this slight guy. He's got bad acne scars, horn-rimmed glasses.
That's kind of the MO of a lot of serial killers.
Yeah.
They're very charming and very,
Yeah, I don't know that he was charming.
But you know what I'm saying.
He was just he was very shy.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of meek and mild-mannered and not anybody that anyone would expect to
Right.
be this way.
Right.
And when he started stealing stuff, they were like, oh, he just suffers from this manic depression. We're going to put him on lithium.
Right.
He's fine. He's going to be fine.
Right.
God love his heart. It's because of his mental condition.
Right.
And they don't know that he's just out there picking up these women left and right and sexually assaulting them and then killing them and burying them in graves.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to hear what's going to happen in next episode.
It's not good, but I will continue.
All
I
right.
will press on.
All right. Well, let's continue with a little bless your heart then.
Well, bless your heart.
All right. Number 1, I'm calling maybe try Match.com next time.
Okay.
A deputy in Baxter County, Arkansas, noticed some suspicious activity coming from a parked car. The deputy saw that the car was rocking in a strange manner.
Was it fogged up inside?
Well, according to reports, when the officer investigated the bizarre movement, he allegedly found 55-year-old Theodore Morgavin III having some intimate time with a stuffed animal.
What?
During a search of the vehicle, a purse was found that allegedly contained drug paraphernalia and 3 grams of meth. Morgavin was charged with 2 counts of possession of a controlled substance, public sexual indecency, possession of drug paraphernalia, and more.
Assault of a furry stuffed
I don't-
animal.
I was very say I don't really want to know
what the more is?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When in court, Morgavin entered a plea of not guilty, as he said it was consensual. No, I added that last part. I don't know if he said it was consensual. It just seemed like it was funny.
Not guilty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not known what became of the stuffed animal or if it's actually been cleaned since.
Oh.
All right, number 2. This is foolproof.
Okay. Which means it's not. Okay.
A woman in Florida thought she was going to be able to trick the Florida courts with her homemade urine.
What?
Well, 44-year-old Shannon Hunter had one of the most harebrained schemes cooked up Well, she wanted to fake a drug test.
I knew that's where you were going with
Yeah,
this.
she was arrested after trying to fake a pee test with soda and tap water.
Ew.
She smuggled the homemade pee in a prescription pill bottle hidden inside her body.
Oh.
The court employee was familiar with the tactic, but typically synthetic urine are inside the pill case. She'll have to do a few weeks in jail, pay some fines, and could have her probation.
Probation?
Yeah, have her probation revoked or her probation revoked, whatever.
One of those two.
Yeah. All right, number 3, and finally,
Yeah.
having a bad day?
Not so far, but it's early.
Well, according to the report, Brian Baker and Ashley Baker were arrested for DWA after Brian stopped his truck and got out. The truck began to roll forward because he didn't put it in park properly. So Ashley tried to hop in the driver's seat and stop the vehicle from hitting Brian. She failed at the attempt, and Brian was hospitalized for serious injuries. But to add insult to injury, the police also issued him a DUI ticket. Yeah. Bless his heart.
Bless his heart. Well, you called it a DWA at the first, and I was like, a driving under the. Then I was thinking it was an assault, because then she moved from the passenger to the driver and then purposely ran over her husband. That's what was going on in my head.
Oh, well, you know.
Well, if you have a bless your heart, or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to Hitched to Homicide. When you get down there, there's a pull down menu.
And if you get a DWA,
While you're there, you can also suggest a case or tell us about your brush with true crime.
Yeah.
That's my amazing husband out there.
that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.